The following program may contain coarse language, violence, nudity, mature subject matter, or scenes which may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
There we go. Welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, Xzone Radio TV. And on channel 57, that's the Xzone TV channel on Simul TV at www.simultv.com. Kristy Sumner is my guest this hour. She is a paranormal investigator, and she's with Soul Sisters Paranormal. Joining me now is Kristy. Hey, Kristy, how are you tonight?
I'm well, Rob. How are you doing?
Pretty good, thank you. For the listeners who may not know who you are, as well as the viewers now, tell us who you are and what got you into being a Soul Sister Paranormal investigator.
Well, my name is Dr. Kristy Sumner, and I, as you said, I'm the founder of Soul Sisters Paranormal. And my sisters and I have always had a fascination with the paranormal. And in 2013, we had the opportunity to go to West Virginia, Moundsville, West Virginia, which is where the West Virginia State Penitentiary is located. Mm-hmm. And we had a family friend that sat on the board of that facility, and he said, you know, while you're here, why don't you just take one of the nights and stay in the prison? And so we did, and had a couple of voice recorders, a couple of digital cameras, and came away with that from that experience with what we considered valid, unexplainable instances, such as footsteps, doors slamming, male voices when there was no men in the area. And so that really kind of catapulted us into wanting to pursue this further, really to go to historic locations, tell the narrative of those locations, and then couple that with any paranormal evidence that we may find.
You said doctor, and I'm sorry I didn't address you as doctor. What is your doctorate in?
It's public affairs with an emphasis on criminal justice.
Wow. That's a bit of a reach from that to being a paranormal investigator, but wow. Well, I guess no difference than me being an ex-cop and doing what I do. Okay, there we go.
Yep. Yep.
I see the connection. All right, let's move on. The jail that you spent the night in, what was that like? Were you expecting paranormal activity? Did you go in as a bit of a skeptic? Did you go in as a total believer?
You know, like I said, we always had a belief that something happens after we die. We have that belief in an afterlife. But we always go in with a healthy skepticism, no matter where we go, whatever location we investigate. What makes Soul Sisters Paranormal a little bit different than some of the other paranormal investigation teams out there is that we all have advanced degrees. So I've got a PhD. My twin has a PhD. We've got 2 lawyers on the team and a master's holder. So we all come at this with a research-minded perspective. And so we go in and we try to debunk things first. And that's what we did with that first investigation. You know, for us, it was really one of those, you know, we've never done an investigation before. Let's just see what it's like. It's much different than what you see on the sensationalized television shows. And like I said, for us, when we kind of rule out all of the environmental factors or control for them as best we can, what we're left with is what we call the unexplainable. And that's that's something that we found there in that very first investigation. And so that really solidified that we wanted to form this group and, to the best that we could, really elevate this mainstream into a more professional conversation. And so that's what we did.
So during your investigations, have you been able to come up with evidence, hardcore evidence, the smoking gun, that would stand up in a court of law as fact, not fiction?
We have some very unexplainable things. You know, you're always going to have those skeptics, and no matter what we present, we have those skeptics that say that's not real. But for example, I'll give you an example. My sister and I my twin sister and I just investigated the USS North Carolina, which is a battleship in Wilmington, North Carolina. She and I were the only 2 people aboard the ship. There was a docent, but he was on the top level. He did not come down. We were able to validate that. And so Jenny and I were in the medical ward, or the sick bay of that ship. We were just asking some questions, and we have a male voice saying, "Talk to her," right behind us. In another instance, we were turning a corner and a male's voice said, "Just watch your arm." as we were coming through one of the hatchways there. So those are things that, like I said, to us are unexplainable in that moment when we've controlled for everything else.
Right. But were you able to get a voice recording of that that you
We
could
did.
say to people later, listen? Now, was it an EVP or was it a direct quote?
It was a disembodied voice, and we both heard it in the moment. There were several like that on that ship, on that investigation. So we have throughout all of our investigations, we have those that we hear in the moment that are audible, that are responsive to the questions that we're asking, and then of course we have those that we capture on stationary equipment, such as night vision video cameras or voice recorders that we leave in certain areas in the facility.
How different is an investigation that Soul Sisters Paranormal would conduct compared to the investigations that we see on TV where everything happens all at once?
Well, when you look at the television shows, you've got to understand as an audience member that these shows, one, they have a production crew, they have a budget, they are in a location for multiple nights. For example, we investigated Fort Mifflin in Philadelphia for one night, and this was just after TAPS was there for a week. And so they had the ability, those larger scale productions, to do things that we really can't. And so for us, we go in and we look at the entire environment first. We do a day tour. We take copious notes on locations of things that could influence our investigation, such as airline traffic, train traffic, vehicular traffic. And we make note of that. And that's how we conduct our investigation. Again, trying to control for everything that we can environmentally. And then we go in, we set up our stationary equipment that we leave running throughout the night. And we conduct our investigations with the mindset of trying to debunk first. And then when we do that, what we're left with is what we call unexplainable. So that's a little bit different than how a television show would go in and actually conduct that investigation.
Are they conducting investigations or are they performing?
I think a little bit of both. Television shows and popular media, their entire reason for being is to create an audience base
Right.
that watches the commercials that bring in the revenue and the funds.
Right.
And so they have to sensationalize that. They have to have the door slam. They have to have the sudden moments where we don't really have to do that. The audience that we're going for, they don't expect that from us. And that's not what we give them. We give them a very deep research history dive into the location. And then we couple that with, the things that we found that to us in that moment are unexplainable.
But wouldn't these sensationalistic episodes on TV kind of ruin it for legitimate investigators?
They do to some extent. I think the popular media shows are both a good and a bad. The good is that they allow the general public to know we're out there and we do these things, and that there's people out there that are conducting this research. But to your point, on the other spectrum, they do a disservice to us because they provide that instant gratification, right? You've got 30 minutes of an investigation, 15 minutes of a review, and 15 minutes of evidence reveal. And that instant gratification is different than what a lot of paranormal investigators in this community actually do. I mean, we actually go in, we sit, we communicate, we have a tactile experience with the location that we enjoy. That's why we're there, for that historical component. And then we put together our evidence based on that entire experience, not just panning to the audience, if you will.
So would you say that you're mostly historians and educators, and then paranormal investigators comes third?
I would say historical journalist, absolutely. So, go in, like I said, and be able to have that experience that not many people are blessed to have. I've spent the night in the St. Augustine Lighthouse and the Villisca Ax Murder House and Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary, and not many people can say that they've done that. So for us to be able to bring that experience to our audience and really tell them a deeper dive into some of these locations and to why they exist in the first place and the events that happen there, and why these paranormal claims are there. To your point, that's exactly what we love to do.
How many investigations have you done on alleged haunted or paranormal rich environments that you and your team go in there and there's nothing?
I'd say probably about 30% of the locations that we've gone to, we haven't found anything, or we've found something that debunks it, some environmental factor. For example, we were asked to conduct an investigation at a business where he was adamant that the location was haunted because his night vision video cameras were going off and doing these weird, funky things at night. And so we went in, we conducted an investigation, and we left some of our night vision cameras in different places. And what we found was, after we left and we came back and we looked at all of the video footage that we captured, his storefront was running perpendicular to a road with a high volume of U-turn traffic. So when the headlights would bounce into his storefront, they would hit these mirrors, basically explode the light, for lack of a better term, and blind his night vision cameras. So I told him it's not haunted, it's environmental. And so we look for those type of things first. And then again, what we're left with after that are the things that we can't explain.
Kristy, please stand by. Exonation Kristy Sumner is our special guest, Dr. Kristy Sumner, I might add. Her website, soulsisterparanormal.com. That's soulsistersparanormal.com. And Kristy and I will be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away. And welcome back, everyone. Dr. Kristy Sumner is with us this hour, soulsistersparanormal.com. What has been the spookiest yet most gratifying investigation that you and your team have done, Kristy?
Honestly, where I'm talking to you from right now is the historic Scott County Jail. And this is a location where my business partner, Miranda Young from Ghost Biker Exploration, she and I actually opened this as a historic preservation museum as well as a paranormal research location. And currently, this is probably one of the most active locations that I've ever been.
Really?
It is routine to have door slamming, footsteps running behind you, men whistling behind you. So I'd say that this location is a paranormal rich environment for us. As far as a location that Soul Sisters has gone to, the USS North Carolina, as I said, was a great investigation. We captured some very compelling EVPs. And then the old Gilchrist County Jail in Trenton, Florida. That was a jail that was in operation from 1928 to 1968. And it was an environment where everything that we had deployed that night was something was acting on it, whether it be a K2 meter, a REM pod, an SLS camera, physically audibly hearing things, seeing shadow figures, picking that up on our night vision video cameras and voice recorders. That to me was probably, if I could say, the most perfect paranormal investigation. That was it, because everything we had that night was deploying.
Kristy, why do some places like the location you're at now stay haunted and other places never get haunted?
I think for some place like the historic Scott County Jail, one, it has a longevity, right? So it was built in 1904. It was in operation as a jail until 2008. And it has just seen a variety of instances of tragedy. So, for example, in 1925, we had a sheriff killed right outside the front door. We've had 7 inmates lynched from this jail, natural deaths, suicides, violence. And I think that those type of environments really, it essentially permeates the walls, if you will. And I think that is really what kind of holds that energy in. And because really that's what we're attempting to communicate with, right, is that energy. And so I think places like this, insane asylums, penitentiaries, places like that, some place that has an event that occurs like that really holds that energy.
What's it like being an all-ladies paranormal investigation team, and what are some of the drawbacks, if any?
To me, it's great. I get to investigate with my best friends who are my sisters. And so for me, that is personally rewarding and gratifying. I think for an all-female team, it's a little bit different than a co-ed or an all-male team in the fact that we go in with, I think, an innate sense of empathy for these locations. I'm not saying that we're empathic per se,
Right.
but we go in with a different sort of empathy. We don't go in with bravado. We don't go in with chest thumping or provoking. And I think because we go in with a certain respect level for the place, as well as the spirits we're attempting to communicate with, I think that allows spirits to be more comfortable with us. And, we don't come across as threatening or, anything like that. And we go in with the sense of actually trying to tell the story of the location and the entities we're trying to communicate with. And I think that gives a different sort of respect level from the spirits.
Why don't the spirits leave? Why don't they cross over to the light? Why do they remain if that place was so negative, or there was so much horror, there was so much death, so much anger? Why don't they just leave?
We really operate on three theories. One, that there is something to the phrase unfinished business, right?
Mhm.
That there's something that has to be fulfilled or some event that has to occur to get that spirit to move over, to cross
Okay.
over. Another theory is that they are legitimately stuck. They know that they're dead, but they cannot find a way to cross over or get to the next realm. And then the third is fear of retribution of the life they lived on Earth. I think we see that a lot in jails, penitentiaries, some to some extent in insane asylums, where they feel that if they cross over, they're going to be damned to a purgatory or some eternal punishment for the life they held here. And I think that's why some of them choose to stay, especially in some of those locations.
What are some of the investigation philosophies and techniques that you and your fellow soul sisters use?
Well, as I said before, we really go in with that sense of reverence and respect for for the location, and we
Okay.
really try to communicate with those spirits. Some of the philosophies that we really abide by is that sense of respect for that history and for the spirits, and then. As I said before, we go in with a very healthy skepticism and we attempt to find those environmental factors first. And so we'll go into the location, take a lot of notes during the day, and then
Right.
conduct the investigation by going in, essentially talking for 8 to 12 to 24 hours in the darkness, trying to communicate with those spirits. And then once we're done with that, we collect all of our voice recorders and our video cameras. We go through all of that review. So if I have 10 voice recorders running for 10 hours, I'm listening to 100 hours of audio. Same thing with the videos. And then we meticulously go through anything that we consider unexplainable. And by that, I mean, we will disperse it to the group. If I hear something, I'll clip it. I'll send it to the group and I say, do you hear anything in this clip? And if so, what? And until we come up with a consensus, then we don't put it out there because I feel we're a kind of a microcosm of our audience.
Mhm.
If we all don't agree on it, then we don't put it out there. And then what we do is we do a very deep dive into the research of the location, come up with that historical narrative and those interesting facts, and we produce a video based on that investigation.
How many investigations do you do in a year?
We try to do at least 4, just because of life circumstances.
Mhm.
That sometimes is a little tough. We drive everywhere we go. I don't trust my equipment to the airlines, so everywhere we go, we drive. So the logistics of it is a little tricky. It's become a little bit easier because right now it's just Jenny and myself conducting the investigations, and then the others will join us as they can. But yeah, we try to do at least 4 or 5 investigations a year.
What do you think is there any common thread between the different locations? I mean, besides the fact that they're haunted or that there's paranormal activity, but I mean, is there any scientific connection, ley lines, geomagnetic fields, hardcore evidence that would connect them?
In some instances, there are, kind of especially in the Northeast,
Mhm.
but really, to my mind, it is
Yeah.
the events that occurred in those locations. I don't think that every place is going to be haunted, as I said before, but
Right.
it really is triggered by an event, whether it be a jail, whether it be a prison, or the Ma Barker house in Central Florida, where you just have this one event occurring in 1935, but yet that event really permeated into the house. So I think it's more the event
Mhm.
of the location more so than some overall, scientific bubble, if you will.
The Waverly. Every paranormal investigator I've had on this show talks about their investigations with the Waverly.
Mm.
And why do investigators keep going to these places if other investigators have already been there?
I've never been to Waverly. I'll
Okay,
just put that
yay,
out there. I've
2 of
never
us.
been. Um, and I really think it's the draw. of some of these locations. It's a location where, for the most part, you can be guaranteed some type of an experience, whether you build up that experience in your mind or you legitimately have a paranormal encounter or an unexplained encounter.
Yeah.
It's one of these locations. Same with the Lizzie Borden House. It's talked up so much that I think a lot of investigators think that they're going to have that experience, and that's not to say that they won't. But for us, we did kind of start with West Virginia State Penitentiary, as I said. That was by coincidence, but it's also one of the most haunted locations reportedly in the country. And so we felt like we would have some type of an experience there. And I think the same thing happens with Waverly and some of these larger locations, which is why for us, even though we go to those locations really more so to build our portfolio than anything else, the smaller, lesser known locations that have a legend or a lore are the places that we really like to investigate. Like I said, I brought up the Ma Barker house earlier. That's an investigation that I'm the most proud of. We were the very first team to investigate that house. It's in Central Florida. As I said before, it was the shootout of the 1935, the location of the 1935 shootout between Ma and Fred Barker, two members of the Barker Carpus gang, and 12 members of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover's flying squad. And they surrounded this house. A shootout ensued. It's still the longest shootout in FBI history. Ma and Fred Barker were killed in the house. And, for us to be able to be the first investigative team to investigate this house, again, knowing that specific history, that was a tremendous opportunity for us. And that's what we love to do, to focus on these smaller places, bring that history to life and put that out there for our audience.
Good for you. I love the way that you think and that you operate.
Thank you.
While you were there, what paranormal activity did you encounter?
So the Ma Barker house, as I said, is interesting. It's because it was in 2016, the original family that owned the house in 1935, they kept it in the family. In 2016, Marion County, Florida actually purchased the home and floated it across Lake Weir and set it. Yeah. And so it's 2.5 miles away. They put it on a barge, floated it across Lake Weir. And so now it sits on about 40 acres of essentially Florida wilderness. And so that was a location that we knew we had complete control of the environment. There's no power, there's no water. You can't get back to it unless you have a 4-wheel drive vehicle. And so we actually did a 2-part investigation. So the first part, I wanted it to be on the anniversary of the shootout, which is the morning of January 16th. So on January 15th, we went in and we set up all stationary equipment in the house. We left some pre-recorded questions on a voice recorder, and then we left. We blocked the doors and we left and let everything run through the night. And so when we went through that audio and video, we captured the sound of a chair being dragged across the floor. We heard a man's voice saying, "Get out." And in the room where Ma and Fred were killed, we captured 2 EVPs. The first one said, "Freddie." The next one said, "Yeah, Ma." And this first one said, "Get ready." And I think that's a residual response. I think that's actually what they said in 1935. And so then 2 weeks later, we went back, just Jenny and I, and we stayed for about 6 hours in the house. And we used various tools. And one of the most telling things that we captured was in the room where Ma and Fred were killed, we had a spirit box, which is that AM/FM radio that very quickly goes through frequencies.
Yeah.
So theoretically, you should never hear a phrase come through this unless it's something unexplainable. So when I asked what happened I said, "What happened in this room?" And through the spirit box, it said, "They murdered us. We the ones dead." Again, extremely telling because it's germane to that room. It's germane to the event that happened there. And then I said, one of the members of the Barker Carpus gang was named Alvin Carpus. And I never said the name Carpus, but I said, "Alvin, are you in this room?" And the spirit box said Alvin Carpus. It came through very clearly. And so those were some of the things that we were picking up on in that house.
Fascinating. Where do you guys hope to go in the future?
We have several investigations that are lined up for next year. We're going to a couple of hospitals, which I'm really excited about. And hopefully we can get all of our ducks in a row and go get international. I would love to go to Ireland, to Leap Castle, hit some of the places in London. Australia, there's a place down there called the Monte Cristo Plantation. it's fascinating. I've been there as a tourist, but not as an investigator. It's a fascinating location. I would love to get down there. So there are a lot of things on the horizon for us and places that we'd like to go. We also have aside from our investigation videos, we have a kind of what I call a spin-off series called Landmarks, Legends, and Lore. And these are places that we highlight that we don't so much do an investigation at, but we tell the haunting history and the legends behind those locations. So for example, we've got one episode called Haunting Aviation, where we look at aviation crashes, or haunting cemeteries or haunting bridges. And so again, those are little locations that we like to go to, get the stories behind it that, locals may know, but the general population might not, and really highlight those locations. So we're hoping to put together at least 3 or 4 more of those episodes next year.
Yeah, you said before that most likely scenario, or one of the scenarios why places remain haunted, is because of the negative impact that the event had, and that is absorbed into the building.
Mm-hmm.
What about graveyards? Why would a graveyard be haunted?
To be honest with you, I have not had a lot of experience in graveyards or cemeteries. We've had a few interesting things. Every now and then dowsing rods will go off. I was investigating down in St. Augustine with my best friend, Miranda, and she's a paranormal investigator as well. And she had a very interesting dowsing rod session. For me, I just think the idea of being in a cemetery or a graveyard is creepy in and of itself for most people. Like I said, we've had a few instances, but honestly, graveyards for me have not been a very paranormally active location, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. All right. You and I have to take our second break here, so please stand by. Kristy Sumner, Dr. Kristy Sumner, is our special guest, and she is with Soul Sister Paranormal. Websites, soulsistersparanormal.com and Historic Scott Co-Jail. HistoricScottCoJail.com, and we'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away. The website is SoulSistersParanormal.com and HistoricScottCoJail.com. Kristy, when do you think the scientific community will get behind the paranormal investigators and finally put some serious research into what you and paranormal investigators around the world are trying to accomplish?
I think we're moving in that direction. I think as technology increases and we get more tools to really help us in this research, I think they're going to get there. I mean, just look at where we are with UFOs, right? So there's more evidence coming out, and the government is actually corroborating some of those things. So I think that the paranormal field will start to get there. I think what does a little bit of disservice to us in that regard is the fact that you've got these individuals who have moved on to the TikTok world and the Instagram world, where they're putting out things very quickly, and people are not researching whether or not it's actually true or whether or not it's actually real. And they're just taking it as scientific fact, or fact, if you will, the general population. And so I think that kind of does a disservice to those of us who are actually going in and trying to do valid research around the paranormal field. Because most people, like I said before, want that instant gratification. And so I think technology is getting there. And I think once we really start looking at it with a more scientific eye, then we'll be taken a little bit more seriously, mostly by the mainstream public.
Why is it so necessary to establish the validity of the paranormal, especially with ghosts? What is going to happen once it's proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that ghosts are real?
I think the reason why it's such a fascinating field is because it's going to happen to all of us, right? Every single person is going to experience death. And because we don't have a solid answer as to what happens next, I think people are always going to question it. And I think that everybody has their own beliefs and mindsets. I mean, I know some people who think that once you close your eyes, you just cease to be, and that's it. I mean, to me, that's a horrifying thought. And then there are other people that have other worldviews and other religious views as well. But it's something that all of us are going to experience. So I'm sure that's why all of us are questioning it. Just some of us go a little bit more deep deeper into that field of study than others do. But, when you tell somebody that you're a paranormal investigator, they either look at you like you have three heads or they want to tell you their ghost story. And more people are wanting to tell us their ghost stories. They've had an experience, or their grandmother had an experience, or their dad had an experience. So it's in the conversation. It's just whether or not people are really believing or getting behind what we're doing scientifically.
So in your opinion, why do people fear death?
Because it's the unknown. As Shakespeare said, it's the undiscovered country from which we don't return. So it's that, I think that's why, because there is that unknown. For me personally, this journey with Soul Sisters Paranormal has actually lessened my fear of death, because I know that there's something that happens after this. We don't just cease to be, we go on. Now, I am a Christian. I do believe that there's a heaven after this, that's the next realm. But I also believe that there are some spirits or souls that don't go automatically, that they have unfinished business. They are trying to communicate with us. And so that's why I think there's such a fascination with it, because like I said, we're all going to experience it.
Not to offend anybody's religious beliefs here, but could heaven be the interpretation of those who wrote the scriptures way back when because they didn't know how to understand the paranormal? Could heaven and the paranormal, the other side, be the same thing?
It could be, and that's an interesting question. But the Bible also mentioned ghosts. The disciples, they thought that when Jesus was resurrected, that he was a ghost. That was their frame of reference. So when people try to put me off guard with the religious aspect, the Bible is essentially a ghost story, right? It has ghost stories in there, and they had that frame of reference then. So they were able to differentiate between a ghost and heaven. So that's kind of what I draw from, right? It wasn't something that was just born up in the last couple of centuries. There's always been this fascination, again, with death and the belief in the afterlife.
Kristy, I too am a Christian, so I didn't want to offend anybody who was listening.
Yes, sir.
It's, to me, it's the greatest book that has ever been written, and we can learn a lot. But I also ask myself, and the many friends I have who are theologians, how would the Bible be written if the events that happened way back then happened today?
That's a very interesting question. Did I lose you? That's to me a very interesting question. Honestly, I've never been asked that before.
I'm back here.
There you go.
It's great when it really works, eh? All right, we've got something here from one of our viewers. Her name is Miranda, as a matter of fact. Let's see what Miranda has to say. I completely agree with you on that. I think it has to do with all of the emotion that those cemeteries hold, a lot like my funeral home. I'm sorry. A lot like why a funeral home might be haunted, possibly even the collective emotions of all those folks bring to that location. Thanks a lot for that, Miranda. And wow, there's your buddy.
Yeah, that's the ghost biker.
That's the ghost biker. So, like when we look at the Bible, when we look at the hauntings, we look at the investigations that are going on. Is this where theology, science, and the paranormal come to a crossroad? Is this the Armageddon?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I actually think it's the opposite. For me, like I said, for me personally, this has strengthened my belief in religion and has strengthened my belief in the afterlife. It has actually made me think long and hard about the afterlife. And it's one of those things that now I feel more strongly about. It's not pulling me away from my religious beliefs.
Right.
And, I think that a lot of the individuals that I've spoken to that share those same beliefs feel the same way, that are paranormal investigators. It's not something that you believe in the paranormal or you're a Christian. They're not, mutually exclusive.
Sure.
You can absolutely be both. And for me, it's a journey that has strengthened that religious belief.
Kristy, we've got to take our final break. Please stand by. Exonation Kristy Sumner is our special guest. Dr. Kristy Sumner. Sorry about that, Kristy.
It's okay.
No disrespect meant there.
No, absolutely not.
Her website, soulsistersparanormal.com, and we'll both be back as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in, you nearly said Crystal Beach again, Craig, so what's that, another $5 I owe you? St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. And we're back. Dr. Kristy Sumner is our special guest, paranormal investigator. She is with Soul Sister Paranormal, and their website is soulsistersparanormal.com. First of all, Kristy, thanks so much for joining us tonight. A great pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely.
Talking about religion and the paranormal, does holy water and the crucifix really work to ward off negative spirits?
I think they do. And I think it is because of, again, the emotion that we put behind it, as well as, I think it just has that connotation of being healing. Same as, a Ouija board would go the opposite direction. Personally, we don't use Ouija boards. It's not because I don't believe in them, but it's because of the negative connotation that most people subscribe to when they think of Ouija boards. And so I think it's actually one of those things where I do think that they're blessed. I do think that they help, but they also think it's the process of the mind as well.
How has paratourism helped or hindered the paranormal?
Oh, I think paranormal tourism is something that has absolutely helped the paranormal. This is one of the topics that I've actually researched over the last year. And one of the reasons why I'm here in this jail now, I think that there is absolutely a rise in the belief in the paranormal, as we spoke about before. I mean, there was a 2019 poll where it says 1/3 to 1/2 to 1/3 of Americans believe that that there is ghosts, that the presence of ghosts do exist. And for me, I think a lot of locations are capitalizing on that. They're capitalizing on what we call paratourism or dark tourism, and they're using that to their advantage, especially during COVID. Paranormal investigators those were the group that allowed a lot of these locations to keep their lights on. I had several phone interviews with multiple people across the country that have quote unquote haunted locations, and they welcomed paranormal investigators during COVID to pay the bills. And so paranormal investigators, we're a group of people that we're in the age group that we have the expendable income. We're of the age group where we have the time to travel now. And I think we're the ones that are really going to propel this forward with regard to research. The paranormal investigators that I've studied, we're spending over $1,000 a year just in travel. And that's just to go to these locations. That's not including hotels, gift shops. We're buying things at locations, food, and gas and all of that other stuff to travel to these locations. So for me, paranormal and tourism is really a fascinating topic. And I think it's one that more locations are going to start taking advantage of when they see the economic benefits.
Okay, I can understand that prior to the justification and the evidence to substantiate the fact that ghosts are real. What happens after that to these places? Do they become just like other tourism industry haunts?
I don't think so. I think, but I think it's also in the way that they're presented by people in our community, right? And so, like for example, when I produce a video, say the last one I just aired was the USS North Carolina. If we can present it in a way where people say, I want to go to that location for the history of it, and the paranormal really kind of becomes secondary, I think you're going to capitalize on that. I mean, tourism, you're talking about a $3 billion a day industry where people are going to spend money. And pre-COVID, you had this movement toward heritage tourism or paranormal tourism. But then after COVID, people are seeking these things out. They're not seeking out Disney World anymore. They're seeking out these locations where they can have this tangible experience with locations from the past. And so that's one thing that I think people are absolutely taking advantage of. And I don't think that's really going to change if we can preserve the history. That's the caveat.
Yeah. I agree with the historical part of it. I really think that paranormal investigators, when they do the historical part like you and your teams do, are doing a great service. As for Disney World, hey, come on. It's way too expensive. Way too expensive. It's over, it's a ripoff.
Well, and you go to Disney,
Yeah.
you experience Disney, you go the next time, you experience Disney,
Mhm.
you experience Disney. With the paranormal, within the paranormal realm,
Yeah.
I go to Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary and I experience Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary. I go to the St. Augustine Lighthouse and I experience the lighthouse. That's
Mhm.
what's so unique about this tourism niche, is that every location has a different historical narrative and
Yeah.
it has a different haunting narrative as well. And that's why when you're looking at paranormal as a whole, you can't just say, oh, paranormal tourism. These locations have to capitalize on their uniqueness, and I think that's what we're starting to see.
What are your final thoughts for the X-Zone Nation tonight?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, and thank you
Oh,
for
it's my great pleasure.
who's watched and commented and listened. For me, it's one of those things with Soul Sisters Paranormal. We absolutely love what we do. The fact that I'm here in this historic Scott County Jail and I get to do it with my business partner, Miranda from the Ghost Biker. These are things that I love and I love speaking about and I'm very passionate about. And I hope that everybody really kind of can see that and then realize we're in this for the historic preservation as well as for the paranormal tourism.
Kristy, let's do this again in the near future.
Absolutely, Rob. I'd love to.
Take care of yourself and my very best to the rest of your team. And thanks for doing the great work that you do.
Thanks, Rob. Have a great night.
Take care, my friend. X-Zone Nation, our guest this hour has been Kristy Sumner. And that's what I call a paranormal investigator. I love what she and her team are doing. And I wish them the very best of success. If you'd like more information about Kristy Sumner and her team, visit soulsistersparanormal.com and historicscottcojail.com. Wow, what a great hour. I'll be back on the other side of this, 14-minute break as we continue at the top of the hour here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario. You can always send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, and on all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X-Zone. I'll be back. Don't go away.